It's an art school which is about 150 years old, established by Lockwood Kipling, Rudyard Kipling's father. So it was one of the art schools established by the British in India. And as you probably know, we had the British in India for 300 years. And they had established 5 art schools based in the British academic style. So that was what my background was in the art school. I had to get away from that, and it took a long time to do that. Immediately after I finished at the art school, I went to Paris for 2 years, and that was a very interesting process because it was very soon after 1968, which was when the student revolution was on. I went between 1970 and 72. So the aftermath of the revolution was a very interesting period where universities were revamping themselves and education was much more liberated. And I had the chance to go in and out of faculties as I wished. So it was a time to listen to Sartre and Simon and Foucault and people like that. It was a very rich period. Also a very important period of politicization, and everybody had some color of red on them. So either you were a Trotskyite or a Marxist or something. So that was an interesting period. I came back to India in 73, and for a long while I did straightforward painting with oil on canvas. But after this I started to work in a studio which is in the heart of the commercial part of Bombay, where the wholesale markets are. It's a very interesting place. It's a place called Lohar Chal, where very high-tech equipment is sold, but this equipment is carried in very medieval fashion from the wholesalers to the retailers. It's carried on the heads of people in baskets. So this is the kind of life and the street life that I was interested to get into my work. It's a place I've worked in now for the last 18 years. So a lot of my work is based on homelessness and the kind of street life that I have around my studio. I'm the only artist there, so I'm sort of pointed out to as some kind of freak. I also work with collaborations, and I like working in collaborations. I worked with one of the artists who's here, Vivan Sundaram, and an artist at home named Bhupen Kakar, on a huge glass mural project, which was one of the first collaborations that I did. Subsequently, I worked with a theatre person on a very interesting play written by a German playwright who's based on Medea, the Greek tragedy Medea, written by Euripides but modernized by Heiner Müller. And this was a very difficult text. It was 3 soliloquies recited by this performing artist, and I had done the installation for that. I'm going to be working on another theatre project later in the year, of which you'll see part of it. There is a process of it, which will be the video, which will act like a bubble, like a comic bubble. And it will be in the cyclorama. So what you see is about 10.5 minutes of a woman's mind. So it's self-explanatory, and I think there's a pamphlet that's going around that you could have. The work I have here in this space is called the Mutants, and it's done with fabric dye on milk carton paper, pasted over unbleached cotton. And I have been doing this series now for the last 2 years. I work in a series, and I think there are 2 reasons why I work in a series. One is a sense of anxiety, and this anxiety is that the subject is always bigger than the art, and I'm incapable of getting all of it in. So I keep on working in a very obsessional manner from one work to the next, till I find that, it's just gone beyond me. The work alongside the mutants are women, directly down on the wall. And my idea has been that the mutants actually come from it's a sort of a futuristic idea about the species, about the human species, which may not survive very long, considering what kind of with the kind of effulgence and pollution that we have to live with. Especially in the developing world, we're obliged to accept a lot of stuff from the first world because we're like the sinking sewage sinks. We have to accept lead from the United States, otherwise they refuse to trade with us. Things like this are happening all the time in Africa, India, and other parts of Asia. So the mutants are people who are born because of these effulgence. And there has been already a history of this, and you might remember that in 1954, the Americans tried out some nuclear tests in the Polynesian Islands in a place called the Bikini Atoll. The inhabitants were moved to another island, and after 10 years they said these people could come back. However, they did not realize that the nuclear fallout was immense. And the babies that were born to the women who came back, they're called jellyfish babies. They only lived for a few hours and died. So that's the kind of Holocaust that we should be looking at and fearing. So the mutants are those people who are born because of these problems, and the women in the world are the procreators. And of course, it's the women who finally lament and mourn when all these things are done. The women will be wiped away, and the mutants will move on, and hence it's an ephemeral work with death implicit in it. And you've seen those works, you've already been around. I do a lot of other things as well. I make books. I like making books. For one thing, I think it's very good for women to make books. They can carry them around with them. I have 2 children. Whenever they're sick or they need me at home, I can work on my books. It's a small space and it's also a big space, especially if you're doing an accordion book. And this one is about 304 centimeters long. So when it folds up, it's very small, but when you open it up, it can be quite big. And you don't need much space to work. So that's the reason why I do books. And also it's part of my obsession on nature to keep piling up images one over the other. It's also very much part of our tradition to make books. There have been terrific folios and books made traditionally in the past. Also the wall drawings are very much part of our tradition, especially in the villages of Rajasthan. People paint on their walls. They're not necessarily permanent works or anything, they just are done for a festival and then they're gone. They're also part of performances that take place in certain villages. So this is very much comes from a tradition. However, I don't use the tradition. I use motives and ideas that run through several cultures, because I do believe the deer is mine as much as it is yours or the Greeks, or whether it's Oedipus or whoever. It's not really confined to the Greeks. I think Beethoven is part of Africa as any other book from Severus.